It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders, and there are a few things more exciting to insiders than the state budget. It shapes not only policy in Wisconsin and affects all sorts of people's lives, it shapes the next set of elections in the state as well. So Chuck, the governor began to unveil a number of budget items leading up to his big budget address for the legislature. He unveiled a huge plan for making changes in Wisconsin's prison system as sort of a centerpiece of that. And then he put out the rest of his spending plan, which included both tax cuts and tax increases. What do you think about the governor's budget? How's this going to turn out with the legislature?
I really like the governor's budget because it addresses what people have been saying they're worried about, which is that, oh my God, this is just too expensive to live now. Can't we get some relief? And I love the thing that he did that's really not visible, but very important. Not taxing women's feminine hygiene products and other related things that are really basic, but you don't think about it. But it is something that costs people a lot of money, and taking the sales tax off of that is really important. Some of the other things, not taxing tips. Yeah, Donald Trump wanted, but hey, we should always be open to taking good ideas and making them work. And Governor Evers is adopting that for the state of Wisconsin. These are good things. But then when you turn to the big policy issues, I think the governor has hit a home run with his prison plan. He was supported even by local government and Republicans about his decision that, hey, it's time to close the Green Bay Correctional Facility. He was also applauded by the mayor of Waupun and others when he said, hey, let's expand what we've got over here in Waupun. Even though Waupun is the oldest prison, Green Bay just wasn't working. And so this seems to be a strategy that local leaders in both areas like. And so the other big component of this is being able to get rid of a facility that has the federal government's won out. And God, Evan Goyke, who's even no longer in the legislature, who made it a cause célèbre about closing down the juvenile detention facility in northern Wisconsin. That's going to happen under this proposal. And by the way, Governor Evers makes a really good point. It's the less expensive and also the quickest way to accomplish these objectives. That's something I would hope the legislature would adopt. Now, the Republicans are saying they don't want to do any of this. You know what? I think there's a lot of good ideas in here, and they're going to do that at their peril. They're up for election this year in a competitive situation for the majorities in both houses. And I'll tell you, there's enough good stuff in there that they could be called to account if they just throw this stuff to the side.
So with regards to the prison proposal from the governor, I think you saw Republicans say, we're open to this. We're willing to take a look at it. I think they're open to one part of it, which is they're open to the idea of modernizing the prison system, of capital expenditures to take some of these prisons that have been here since the 1800s and bring them up to date, make them safer, not only for the prisoners, but also for the people who work there. I think they're open to that sort of stuff, but they are not going to go along with the governor's complementary proposal of letting people out early as part of this transition to a new correction system. Republicans are not going to go along with them on that. I think they're open to some of the capital expenditures, the infrastructure needs of the correction system. It is kind of sad, really. You pointed this out before yourself, Chuck, that I mean, we had all the problems in Lincoln Hills. Both parties probably have blame with regards to that. You have the bribery, drugs, cell phone scandal that's going on at Waupun, and you have the unsafe conditions at Green Bay. This administration is right to sort of put a focus on trying to clean all this up. It's probably a little late. I think you would hope both parties would have stepped forward to fix some of this earlier. It's just taken too long. With regards to the budget overall, we've seen this movie before, right? The governor comes in and makes all sorts of proposals. The Democratic side of the aisle stands up and cheers, and Republicans say dead on arrival. And that's exactly what happened here again. Why? Well, the governor came in with a budget that is a nearly 20% increase in spending. We're sitting on a huge surplus here in Wisconsin, and the governor felt the need to raise taxes by $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion. Why? Because he wants to increase spending by 20%. There is no way a Republican legislature is going to agree to a nearly 20% increase in spending. So a lot of the things that are in the governor's budget are not going to make it through the fray. The Republicans will start over on a lot of pieces, but they'll accept the Trump tax, no tax on tips proposal. They'll accept some of the smaller tax proposals, but the plan really didn't have a big tax cut. It had a bunch of small little tax cuts, and then it had a big tax increase. So I just think those parts of the budget, those are all going to go away. The Republicans will start over as they've done before, and then the negotiations really begin, right? They'll work a budget that comes out of finance. Then the conversation will begin with the governor's team. Last time they were able to cut some big deals together. Let's hope that they could figure something out this time as well. If not, we're headed towards a collision in June when the legislature sends its budget to the governor looking much thinner and with a bigger tax cut than what the governor put in his proposal.
I think the dynamic that's different about this budget than previous budgets is this is the first budget where whatever happens in this budget is fodder for determining which party will control the houses of the legislature. The Republicans have never faced a situation where they could lose the majority in both houses after a budget, and this is one where they can. I think the Republicans are so used to muscle memory for them is trash the governor's budget, trash everything he's done, no matter how good it is. Don't even take those little tax cuts. And then let's do our own thing and screw Wisconsin public education, K through 12 education yet again. I don't think the governor's going to go for it this time. I don't think the public's going to go for it. And the Republicans pursue that strategy at their own peril. They have not had this for more than 10 years. And I think now they're finally going to be called to account. So I think Scott is right about what they'll do for the most part. I just think that it's going to be a dangerous strategy. And I think they will be surprised at how much it hurt their marginal candidates and lost them the majority in the next election.
Well, we'll see. As we talked about it, I believe that this not only determines public policy in Wisconsin, it determines the framework for the next set of elections. It was the Republicans who ran on the cost of living in the last election. And I think they're going to do the things in the governor's budget that has to do with lowering the cost of living for families in the state. And one of those ought to be able to say to retirees, we're not going to be taxing retirement income anymore in Wisconsin. You ought to be able to say to other people who are working every day, you know, we're going to cut taxes from the bottom up. We're going to cut taxes for people who are working. This state is still, I know we've gotten out of the top 10, but we're not out of the top 20. And our income is certainly not in the top 20 in the country. We need to right size our budget to fit our wallet. And I think the Republicans are going to work on that in this election.
Well, they will certainly work on it. But I think that the problem is that the neglect that they have put into K-12 education is going to be felt around the state. And I think people are going to start voting that instead of on this other things. I think that it's going to be a situation where the Republicans will see this come back to bite them. And by the way, in the last election, the Republicans lost every competitive state Senate seat that there was to be had. There were 4 competitive seats that were open or had, and then there was one, Brad Pfaff, that was competitive beyond. So arguably 5. Every one of those seats was lost by Republicans. Watch for a repeat performance of that in the state Senate, which will get the Democrats an 18-15 majority. And guess what? That Republican majority in the Assembly, which they think they've got such a great situation, I think there's a good chance that that majority goes away as well. And then if there's a budget surplus sitting there, hey, guess who gets to spend that money the way that people want it spent for public education? That will be Governor Evers and the 2 houses of the legislature controlled, although very closely, but controlled by Democrats.
Well, I'm sure you've convinced yourself on that, Chuck. We'll see what the public thinks. All right. See you next week.
See you next week.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.